Jack and June, it's so nice to see you guys again. Here we are, doing another interview. I can't believe it's been what, 5 years, something like that.
I think it was for our 50th wedding anniversary. And
Right.
it will be 58 years this coming August. So it's 7, 6. I think it's more than 5 years.
Well, you guys both look fantastic, and you are you're in. Where are you at now? Are you in the same place where we did the initial interview?
Right, we're in a different room.
We came into New York in 1950, and my parents settled in New York simply because my father's relatives were in New York, Upper Manhattan. That's where most of the German Jews settled. And we were in Upper Manhattan, 1950s on. What do I remember? Everything was just as Jim said, everything was there. We'd go downstairs. The subway station was right underneath our apartment building. At night, you could hear the subways. You know, when you were in bed, you could hear the rumble of the
Take
subways.
the A train.
Yeah.
This was, the subways were, I think, a dime at the time, maybe a nickel. I had a car for a while, and my friends would jump into the car, and we'd go to a place called Adventureland. We'd have our hot dogs and hamburgers and hang around. The high school I went to had a bowling team. I was on the bowling team. But my high school was not walking distance. My high school was an hour's ride on the A train. I would commute from Manhattan to Brooklyn.
Brooklyn Tech.
Yeah. What are you doing on the bus? Are you reading? Are you doing your homework? Are you sleeping?
Homework. That's why my homework was always jittery.
Makes sense. Talk to me about New York. Why do you love it? How do you feel about it? Is that thing once a New Yorker?
So much anymore.
Right. But growing up there,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was, it wasn't Leave It to Beaver,
Right.
But I never felt unsafe. I walked to school 5 years old. I would cross, major streets, intersections where there were buses coming in both directions. And I remember coming home from kindergarten, and I remember carrying the painting I had done that morning, and walking home was still wet, walking home. I remember that clearly. Nobody waited for you at 3 o'clock at the school.
Right.
And come home for lunch. You'd walk home for lunch, and your mother was in the kitchen and made you lunch, and then you'd go back to school. You hung out with your friends, and you put your roller skates on, and you got your chalk, and you marked the street. I mean, it was just as the pictures were of New York City. Forgot what it was called, Potsy, where you jumped into
Hopscotch?
the
Hopscotch?
Well, I think we called it Potsy. I don't know.
I love it. Maybe it was a fresh twist.
Yeah, there you go. And I would go to museums with my friends. Again, we'd get on the subway and we'd go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and get lost in there for hours. And what else did we do? We would go ice skating. That was a big thing.
Totally
I would go on the
world.
subway with my friends at 11 years old to go ice skating at Wallman Rink in Manhattan and Central Park.
Yeah.
I did it,
Yeah.
I don't
adventure.
think I'd send 11-year-olds now by themselves on the subway. And then you walk down the street where there were lots of shops, all totally independent. And there was a place that made homemade ice cream, and there was a place that only sold coffee beans. There was a market called Date Shopwell, and you would go in there and you get a slice of cheese, and they were in those wooden boxes,
Yeah.
And I guess I'm old, the things that I remember our kids have never seen, although we did used to collect out of antiques so that we would buy those kinds of things from our childhood anyway. Having been born in the Bronx, you didn't go to the city. You went downtown. That was called downtown.
Right. So you grew up in the Bronx most of your childhood.
Until I was 11.
And then where did you move to?
Queens.
Queens, right on.
Into a brand new apartments, co-ops. And that was a big deal. The streets weren't even paved. It was such a new community. All the doors shut, easily and the windows opened.
Things were new, right? Everything was new.
new. We had a football team in high school, and we'd go. I could walk to the field where the games were going on, and I was a booster. I wasn't a cheerleader. I was a booster. You know, you shook the things. But I
Yeah.
also worked a lot. I always had some kind of employment, babysitting or doing
Yeah.
something.
So, how did you meet?
We met at college at the City College of New York, uptown.
Right on.
I had just graduated from high school, and I left high school 6 months early by choice. You could take a couple of extra classes and get out 6 months earlier, and I wasn't particularly in love with high school, so I started college, I guess, in January of that year. And then I continued in some school. I said, well, why not? I can go. I was taking biology, which was in a science building. And I went out for a break, and this guy came over to me. Do you want to be a subject for a psychology experiment? What did I know? I was 18 years old.
Right.
I said, sure. And he said, well, you have to go up to this room, and we're going to do a psychology experiment. And guess who this guy's partner was?
Oh, so you were the partner of the
I was
guy.
the part. We
Right.
used to take turns of going out and plucking subjects for our experiments.
Right. Do you
Uh,
remember
maybe-
anything about the actual experiment? Like, what was the subject that you were exploring?
Something about weights and judgment. Most of these experiments were dealt with statistics and how to collect statistics and
Right.
get results, statistical results. So it was very statistical based. It was not clinical psychology, it was experimental
That's what I
psychology.
thought it was.
Right. You thought it was going to be like
Experimental
feelings and all of that.
psychology.
I remember not being able to see something, and I put my hand through a black screen and possibly say, is this heavier or is that heavier, without seeing I sort of remember that.
Right.
And then I remember Time magazine covers. And
Oh, yeah, that one I remember, that experiment was, there was a term. When you see something out of context, in other words, I see you now with this background. And what I did was say, okay, if you didn't have the background, if you saw this person with this background, you know,
Right.
who was it? So I chose Time magazine covers, which were people that were recognizable pretty much by everyone. They would learn who these people were with the background. I took away the background and showed them the same people. And they said, okay, now you memorize who these people were. Now, who is this person? And I would show that person without the background.
So, Jack, do you remember when June walked in? Do you remember that the first time she sort of caught your eye?
Well, when she first walked in, she was just a subject,
Just one of many subjects.
one of many subjects. And lo and behold, you know, we would spend many an hour in the lab environment, which was upstairs in the building on campus. And lo and behold, every time I'd walk out of that lab room, there she was.
Right. So, June,
that's
did
where the bathroom was on that floor.
what did you register early on that there was interest there, that you were interested in each other, or did it bloom over time, or was it kind of an interest?
You know, after a couple of those accidental visits, we got to be friends and we got to know each other. And I think I took her out for a hot dog.
That's
Yeah.
right, Kosher Deli, I remember that.
Do you remember your first kiss?
Yes, it was in a Greek portico overlooking the Hudson River in a place called Fort Tryon Park, which is at the end of Manhattan.
June wore a Madras dress. I remember the dress like it was yesterday. She had a long ponytail that reached all the way back. And that kiss was heavenly.
Aw,
Jack, where did you propose?
I think it was on a bus. We were on a bus and just passing, what was it called, the Audubon something.
It was a
A meeting.
meeting hall. That,
And Malcolm X was assassinated that day. And I remember being on this bus. I don't know where we were going because Jack didn't have a car. I didn't have a car. A lot of public transportation. And I think at that time, there was some discussion about it.
yeah, I really don't remember.
I didn't get down on one knee, let's put it that way.
And how long after you started dating did you guys get married?
2 years. Maybe the second time I saw you, he said, I want you to meet my mother.
My mother was very perceptive. Of course, she was an immigrant. She had a thick, thick German accent. And she pulled me over and she said, that's it. You got to listen to your mother.
What do you remember about your wedding day?
Why don't you take that?
Well, my then brother-in-law and a couple of my friends, including my father, the night before the wedding took me out to a bar crawl,
Right.
from one bar to the next,
The night before the wedding?
night before the wedding.
That usually
Believe
happens
me.
a few weeks before, right?
After the third bar, all I could do was find myself a parking meter so I could just hang on to it.
Oh
I
my
was
gosh. Look at
totally
June's
bombed,
face.
and how can they do this to me? But they did.
Right. This should happen a
Well,
week
you didn't know
before.
how to say no.
I didn't know how to say no.
Wow.
And the next morning, I still lived with my parents in my parents'
Right.
home. My father woke me up. He said, it's the wedding day. You know, you got to get up. He dragged me into the bathroom. He threw me into a cold bath. We finally got to Temple. My best man, Joe, he just walked me around the temple, all around the block. Anyway, by the time the wedding came, I was a little
You were
pale.
all right.
It was a beautiful ceremony.
Where did you get married?
The Hollis Hills Jewish Center, and they had big reception area and a sanctuary. I didn't want to be married in a catering place, you know.
Right.
I wanted to have some religious connection.
Well, the choice of venue
Yeah.
was, my father-in-law was very much involved in that. He took us
Interesting.
around to different venues, temples that had halls to have the ceremony. One day, after making the rounds of like 3, 4, 5 different temples, we finally came home. He sat down, he says, I'm tired of this. I'm
And he-
tired of this.
And he's
He said,
you're pointing to your forehead or your temple, yeah.
He says, I'm tired of going from temple to temple. I think part of my attraction to June was her family. They had cousins clubs that my family really didn't have. So there was a closeness of family that I felt was really attractive.
What do you remember about the way? I remember, you know, it was very beautiful and beautiful wedding gown, and my mother looked lovely and Jack's mother looked, you know, everybody was very into being there.
I do remember the reception line. After, you know, you pronounce man and wife, you go down and you line up so you could shake hands with everyone. I remember that I broke down and I cried.
What was so moving about it?
Just the whole idea of getting married and having June as my wife. I mean, the whole idea just crashed.
Did you guys go on a honeymoon?
Went to Miami,
During the honeymoon, we decided
yeah.
we'd go
water skiing.
water skiing. So we went to the water skiing terminal, whatever, and we went into the water. And the instructor said, the one thing I don't want you to do is touch the bottom. Well, sure enough, I touched the bottom. I wound up in the hospital.
Wow, on your honeymoon.
I had a big gash on my foot.
Well, this guy insisted that it was Carl, but
Yeah.
I think it was old tin cans, you know.
Right. But
So
you had a sunburn and you ended up in the hospital. But otherwise it was
But it
Great.
was great.
It
was great.
The 60s in Miami, it was a big thing.
Oh, yeah, we were in the Deauville, I
We
think.
won a dance contest.
We won a cha-cha contest.
You
We
won a
were-
cha-cha contest?
We did a lot of dancing in our day.
Yeah,
The Lindy. you know,
Yeah.
it was a big thing. When we got married, I had a bank account with $400. Those were my assets
In the world. That's all you had in the world. Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if you had a bank account. I don't
couple of
remember.
$100.
A couple of $100. We got married and we had an apartment, and you
Well-
had a job. I was still finishing college. And sometimes all we had between us was Jack had a token to get to work, and then he would be paid that day.
Right.
And, you know, we managed somehow. We bought a used car. I think that was also $400. A
Right.
Volkswagen Beetle with a canvas roof.
It was also a generation that thought of conservation more than today, you know? You don't want to go into debt.
Yeah, we never had,
Never had
except
debt.
a mortgage, we never had debt.
If
Right.
you want something, you save up for it.
We
Just-
never paid interest on a credit card, you know, the bill came, you paid the bill.
Okay.
It's hard for Jack to spend money. It's
Yeah.
easy for him to give it away to family, but it's hard for
Interesting.
him to spend it on himself. He wants for nothing. He doesn't need anything, he doesn't want anything. He's happy with whatever he, you know, possessions.
Right.
Doesn't want a new watch,
Doesn't need stuff.
doesn't need stuff.
Yeah.
You need a lot of stuff.
That's the way I grew up. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, we never went out to eat.
Yeah.
Very
We
rarely.
didn't either, only
Yeah.
as someone's graduation, you know.
So, yeah, money was important, but it wasn't so important that it was the aim of your life.
You served in the military briefly, am I right?
I served in the National Guard. Well, I remember the basic training was the regular Army basic training. That was an experience, great experience. So the actual service was 6 months. And then following 6 months, you had, I think it was 7 years of reserve. Every weekend and summers, 2 weeks in the summer.
But in 1965, there was a Cuban Missile Crisis. And we thought that the reserves were going to be called up. It was a big thing because many of Jack's friends were in the reserves and starting out their lives and just getting married and so on and so forth. Fortunately, they were not called up, but it was a big deal.
In the 1960s, there was a major black uprising. I mean, really bad. Things broke into fires, whatever,
In New York.
in New York. And we were training in anti-riot formations.
Did you ever get put into a situation where you had to use these things that you've been practicing for?
No, it was all training.
Wow.
It was all training. For 2 or 3 years, I was put into the communications. This is before the satellites, before the internet. But what did I do? What did our unit do? We were laying wire, telephone wire, along stretches of roads. I climbed poles.
Yeah.
And then the last 3 years, I was assigned with an engineering battalion, and we went up to camp. I learned how to build roads and with bulldozers. It's a lot of fun. Yeah,
A lot of different skill sets they're throwing at you.
but never really used in combat. I was very lucky. It wasn't like you were in the Army for 4 or 5 years, but there was a connection.
You
Yeah.
had responsibilities. You had to go every summer, 2
Yeah.
weeks, you had to be away and all the way up state.
Yeah, you were young. Didn't
Yeah.
matter. Parenthood,
remember.
you know, you talk about parenthood and, you know, the early days when the kids were babies, crying in their crib, you getting up at night, walking around with him.
With William.
Yeah, especially the younger one, he was colicky. So those were interesting days, but you know, you were young, you accepted all of this. And
All you wanted was a good night's sleep. You didn't want for much more than that.
Right. You weren't thinking huge, big picture, just a good night's sleep.
Just give me some sleep.
Yeah. Are there other trips that you took together that you really remember that were?
We went to Europe. We went to Israel.
of course, that was the return trip for me. But the highlight of that trip, besides being taken around and seeing the country as it was and as it is and so on, I went back to where I lived. And my father and mother had friends in the building. They used to play cards, and the son of one of our neighbors, Mrs. Katz, was killed during the 48 war. And unbeknownst to her, we went to see the place, and I knocked on her door. I didn't know if she was still living or not. There she was. And she looked at me, and of course she didn't recognize who I was. And I knew that she spoke German because my Hebrew was already gone. So I said, "Don't you recognize me?" German. She said, "No," and I told her who I was.
Mm.
She lit up. She just couldn't believe it. And she says, "I remember you as a kid delivering flowers to make a couple of extra dollars, shekels, as a kid, because there was one thing you wanted to buy and you never had enough money to buy it. And we're going to go and buy it today." And she took us by the hand and walked us to about 2 blocks away. There was a jeweler, and there was in the window, and I still think it was there at that time, 20 years later, was a Jewish star. And she bought me a Jewish star. And I still have it. There it is.
Wow.
This is Mrs. Katz bought me this Jewish star. She says, "It's something that you always wanted as a kid." And I remember, and this is
And
it.
she bought it for you that day.
So every time I see this, and now I'm going to cry.
She had this one son who was gone, no
Yeah.
other children. And I think, now I'm gonna cry. I think she was happy to see that, Jack grew up and alive.
That he was alive, that he's there,
And
right?
he remembered to come back.
What do you remember about it, about
I
that
felt
trip?
that I belonged somewhere. I felt very connected. I enjoyed it. I liked the people, and it was a really nice trip. We went from the north to the south. Jerusalem was very moving, and it was the real deal, not just reading about it in the book and seeing photographs.
That's another time I cried in Jerusalem. As a kid, Jerusalem was under Jordanian control, and they wouldn't let Israelis into the old wall. And it was only during the 1967 or 73 war that Jerusalem was retaken by the IDF. It was open to the public. So, of course, we were already gone. So I never saw the wall. I never saw Jerusalem. So
Until you went back in your 30s.
I'm back and seeing the wall. That was unbelievable. We were up in the northern border
Oh, yeah, I know.
with the soldiers guarding the border. And June asked one of the soldiers whether we could take a photograph of him and her. And I have that image. I could just see it like it was yesterday. This young man must have been 18, 19 years old. And June was beautiful. I mean, just in her prime, so to speak. That image of that moment is still in me. Well, Jeffrey was born with the desire to be a filmmaker. He was 3 years old and he was talking about making films.
Our other son as well, also creative. William was always interested in music. And, when you see that they're doing good things with what they like doing, it's all good.
Jeffrey's reaction a couple of years back, and still hear him say that, we talked about him having children and leaving a legacy. And he said, "Mom, my legacy is going to be my work." This is why he's doing this. He's very different. He sees world much different than we do. And he's very interested in his family tree and background, genealogy. He's collected all kinds of things. I don't know what draws him into that, but he just loves that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think he does that. He tells stories about Vito Russo. He tells stories about Alan Carr, Divine. He's telling a family story and creating a biography of a person. So I think that's what part of his plan is, to bring people together. Our granddaughter she's fabulous. She's got a good mind, and she thinks politically the right way, and she's enterprising, and she goes after what she wants. And since she's been out of college, she's moved to Florida, and she's very confident.
Madison has a relationship with Jeffrey that's unbelievable. because they're both into current culture pop. Her aim this year is to read 100 books. I mean, she's a voracious reader. So we're very proud of her. She's a good kid.
And Avery, our grandson, is pretty much a genius. He has a dual major, art and science. He's graduating from college and he's got to, figure it out.
What do you love about being grandparents?
They go home.
What about for you, Jack? What do you love about being a grandparent?
Being there for them and just loving them and being non-judgmental. They're just a miracle to have. And I wish them the best. There's only so much we can do to help them live their life, but they have to live their own life. And I love it.
I know, Jack, your background is in computers and stuff like that. The technology of today must be intriguing to you.
It's overwhelming. I mean, I was in the Stone Age of computing. It's unbelievable where we've come from such a short time to the electronics that we have to. I mean, just look at us conversing on the screen to screen. You're 3,000 miles away. We're talking like you were next door. My father, who was born in 1901, also talked about all the changes that he went through. There were no airplanes. Cars were just coming into production. Of course, he went through 2 terrible wars. But in the technology area, 1901 through 1940s, 50s, technology changed, and television came in the 1950s, and that changed the world. It's unreal. And now AI, I played around with it. It's incredible. The problem is you don't have to think. Used to be, you memorize telephone numbers of friends and relatives. I don't even know my number anymore.
Yeah.
June is a great cook. She doesn't allow me to go into the kitchen. So what gives me pleasure is when she cooks a meal and she serves it. It's just wonderful to be able to have June around to cater to me, because I feel that that's her love. That's the way she shows her love to me. That's my pleasure. It really is.
And my pleasure, he cleans up.
That's the least I can do. If she cooks a great meal, that's the least I can do is clean up afterwards. Most of the photographs that I took in the 60s, 70s, maybe 80s were on slides. And I had dozens of these slide projection trays.
And when he did have his camera, he carried this equipment in a bag. And then the lens, he wanted a telephoto lens, and you walked around with 50 pounds of equipment.
You had to be very selective on what photographs you took, because you only had so many frames on a roll, and you only had so many rolls that you carried with you.
We were going upstate during the fall, and the colors were beautiful in the Northeast. And Jack got out of the car and had to take this picture. Well, you belong to the photography club here? Belong to the club here. We critique our photographs. I have 2 cameras that I use. Now I've gotten to use the iPhone much more than I ever have. It's easier, and it's incredibly, unbelievably phenomenal taking photographs.
Talk to me about one of your favorite pictures that you took.
There's one.
Let's see. I love a show and tell moment. Bring it over. Unless it's mounted on the wall, then you don't need to.
No, it's in a frame.
Oh, what is it?
I don't know if you can.
Yes, it's June. But I love the way you have your hand up. It's just a moment, right? What's the story of that picture?
It's Jack's 80th birthday.
Yeah.
A dinner we had with just the immediate family.
It was he who finally recognized that he had a problem, that he needed help. That doesn't happen with everyone who's in that predicament. But he decided, this is not what he wanted. Put him on a plane, and someone was at the other end to meet him, and he went through several different phases of recovery. Right. So he's had a few bumps in the road, but he's doing okay. He has a day job and a night job or a part-time job, and which is the music part of it as a DJ.
and it's working out.
What have you learned about those kind of challenges in life and how you sort of persevere?
That it can happen to anyone. Fortunately, we were able to have the resources to help him get really good professional help to find his way.
Well, I want to tell you, June should be part of the CIA because she got at least 100+ people,
Wow.
neighbors and friends, to be in this theater. We have a theater in the building. So, and then there was a ruse for me to come down. A neighbor had a daughter who wanted a grandchild, and she knew that I liked to take photographs, and I was into photography.
Right.
And would I please come down and take a picture of her in the theater, so she can have a publicity photograph. I came down to the theater and I see the theater full of people. Well, sure enough, they were all there to celebrate my 80th birthday. That June, I don't know how she pulled it together, but she pulled this together. And Jeffrey's video, which is actually on YouTube, you can see it. What a phenomenal job he did in melding the narrative with videos. He did a phenomenal job. And occasionally I will go to YouTube and watch this video, which is an amazing tribute to both June and myself.
A friend of ours who lives here, her husband had been admitted for routine, I don't know, hip surgery. And then all of a sudden there was a pandemic.
Yeah.
And she couldn't go visit him. Everything got shut down. And then he was transferred out of the hospital to rehab. And she couldn't go visit him there. And then because these rehab places were like swarming with COVID, he died.
Oh.
And she never saw him again.
You couldn't go out to the barbershop to get a haircut because you couldn't expose yourself. So my hair grew very long. So June went on Amazon and got a kit, a haircutting kit, you know, one of those clippers things, electric. We still have it. And well, we went out on the balcony. I put on a towel over, and she gave me a haircut. We would call up the local grocery store, put our order in, but in many cases we had to pick up the order. So we would drive up to this grocery. You couldn't get out of the car, and the clerks, who were really heroic, because they didn't know what was going on, but they were there, and you'd open up the trunk, and they would bring out the order and throw it into the trunk, close the trunk, and off you go back home. And of course, when you got home, you would spray you would spray everything. I mean, we were afraid.
The silver lining was we do a family Zoom, and we've continued to do that since then. So that's been a really positive thing.
And Jeffrey started it. And when he first started it for the first year or so, every Sunday he'd have a surprise guest.
Oh, right.
And we wouldn't know who it was. You know, he wouldn't tell us.
Somebody from your life.
Somebody from our life.
It was like, this is your life. Like
that was so much fun. Who's it gonna be? I made scarves for 2 friends of mine, and they each died within a few months after getting it. And they sent me a picture that they had it on, and they were both not well. And it was really such a connection that I was able to do that.
I'm a very personal person.
Solitary.
Very solitary person.
you like your quiet time. You like your alone time.
Yeah, I am not gregarious. I am not social. I feel uncomfortable in social situations.
Right.
June isn't around. I'm sitting there and saying, now, what am I going to talk about? You know, June isn't here.
Right.
I have no problem talking to a group of people, a classroom. I have no problem with that. But on a social basis, I feel very awkward. I don't know. It's my history or what it is, but that's who I am, and I got to live with it, and I do live with it. You know, like for example, there's a men's club here in this,
Yeah.
in this area. It's 100 plus people, 100 plus men. Go to meetings. I enjoy the meetings. I enjoy being with these guys. We discuss all kinds of things, but then I go home. June and I will be walking outside, and one of the guys would say, "Hi, Jack." I'd say, "Hi." And June would say, "What's his name?" I say, "I don't know." With few exceptions, I'm not drawn to other people. That's me. That's how I view myself. What do I like? I don't know. I just like peace and quiet. No,
You do like, you like a,
I like crossword puzzles.
Well, I've learned you can't change a person. Wants to be solitary, you know, there's nothing I can do. That's it. Although sometimes he bends, you know, he'll bend, I will, but most of the time, I know it's not gonna happen. He always says no. That's his first reaction to most things, no. You know, so I've kind of accepted that. And then I have to backtrack a little bit, but that would be so great, you know. And then he says, "Okay, we'll go," or "Okay, we'll get that," or so on and so forth. It's gotten a little easier over the years. Always interested in Jewish studies and being involved with our temple. And growing up, my brother had a bar mitzvah, but girls, you know, literally didn't count. So when we belonged to a Reform congregation, I had a bat mitzvah at the age of 33, I think I was, with a whole group of women. And then we continued, we made friends, and the kids made friends, and we continued our association even to this day. And what are you doing this next Saturday?
I'm reading the Torah in Hebrew. There's a group of us who have gone through about a 2 or 3 month session of learning how to cantillate. These are musical notes that describe the music to go along with the reading of it. So
right.
We learned how to interpret those things. Very interesting. We have our graduation next
Your
week.
graduation. Are you nervous? Are you excited?
I'm excited. It's a wonderful thing. It's just it just gets to me.
Yeah.
To see these writings that are thousands of years old, where do they come from?
Right.
It's really miraculous. I view the Bible as a story. It's not something that you have to follow necessarily. It's a story. Right. It's what the people 2,000 years ago felt was the law, their law, right, their way of life. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to live that way today. I mean, there's no reason to stone somebody for right, having a relation with a woman, or a woman being stoned to have a relation with a man, whatever. I see it as a connection to the past. It's fascinating.
Literally, the Bible never spoke to me.
Right.
I just never got a connection.
Sure.
But you know, as we said, culturally, yes, but I don't feel that same connection that Jack does.
What has this moment been like for you in the last 6 months or so since October 7th?
Well, the day that it happened and the news reports, it was shocking. I mean, absolutely shocking. You know, the depravity and the violence is not even the slaughter, the sadistic killing. I mean, the treatment of the women. I mean, every sin, every horrible thing happened that day. You know, and to see people in the streets, yes, they have the right to protest. Well, let's just make an analogy. Nobody is demonstrating that the Russians should get out of Ukraine. Nobody's saying you have to get out of Ukraine. I'm not saying we want to have people slaughtered, but there doesn't seem to be any movement from Netanyahu to make it better, to create this two states so people can live together. It's really been a push and a pull.
Yeah.
And to hear the things that some of these kids are saying, it's outrageous. It really is outrageous. And there were tremendous demonstrations in New York City. I was always felt to be an activist when I was younger, you know, Stop the Nuclear Bomb, the National Committee for
Right.
Nuclear Policy. I mean, and the guys in college, they were burning their draft cards on the campus. But that was their war, you know. This is not our war. And yet politically, it's becoming our war because we
Yeah.
may lose the presidency over this. And it's very difficult, you know, when the people who work for, you know, the Jose, what's his name?
Andreas, the chef. Yeah.
They were killed. That's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
You know, I know the collateral of war, but it shouldn't have been. And the children that are being killed,
Yeah.
you know, they have no skin in the game. They're just little kids.
Yeah.
And their lives are just over or changed forever. So,
War is really hell. And the United States went through World War II, World War One, but let's talk World War II. They bombed and destroyed cities. They bombed and killed thousands of civilians. Why? They wanted to destroy the enemy. When you have an enemy that wants to destroy you, you've got to destroy the enemy. And this is Hamas is an insidious enemy, not only to the Jews, but to the world.
Right.
We haven't experienced it here in the United States yet, but we will if we
Right.
don't stop it. Those extremists are there to kill and to get their ideology to replace the ideology of the West. So Hamas has to be destroyed. Unfortunately, you know, we as Americans destroyed Japan by killing. We
Yeah.
destroyed Germany by killing. We did not stop until that enemy was destroyed. Hamas has to be destroyed. Protect the civilians, yes, in any way you possibly can, but Hamas has to be destroyed. What's going on campuses and the anti-Semitism that has spewed its ugly head is very, very disturbing. Just this morning, June asked whether I wanted to get my citizenship in another country. I mean, I can always go back to Israel. That's my
Right.
home. June can always go to Israel. My parents from Germany, the German government has offered citizenship to Americans who are related to survivors.
whose citizenship has been taken away from them, whose ancestors.
Right. Jeffrey did it. My nieces did it to even start to think about a place to escape
To escape from
from
America.
from the
Yeah.
United States, unheard of. But
Yeah.
you know what? I believe that day will come. The way this is going, that day will come because we've always been vulnerable as a minority. It doesn't matter for thousands of years, whether it's Spain, whether it's an Arabic country, whether it's Russia, we've always been expelled. The difference today is we have Israel. The difference today, Israel has an army.
Yeah.
We didn't have that in the old Polish programs where the government just came in and killed.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as a very happy situation.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Thoughts about America?
Well, it's in big trouble right now.
Yeah. It feels that
Um,
way, right? And then you're thinking like, do people always think this way and it's not really that bad, or is it really that bad? And I kind of think it's
Really
really
that
that
bad.
bad. Thank you.
It's really bad. I mean, we are by a thread. If he's reelected, our whole world will turn upside down. There was
Yeah.
a future, even if a Republican was the president, you didn't feel he was going to, you know, arrest people who were against him. You know,
Yeah.
you didn't love him, but
Right.
you said we'll get through it. We'll get a Democrat soon.
Right.
But it was just different.
Yeah.
This is turmoil. chaos.
I'm a student of history, World War II history in particular, and Germany in particular. And what's happening now is just parallel of what happened in the early 30s, mid 30s in Germany.
Yeah.
Germany, after the war was a democracy.
After the First World War.
Was
Yeah.
democracy. And this crazy guy came along and just
And enough people went along with it.
upended the whole country, and in one night just killed all his opposition.
What are your thoughts about getting older? What does nobody tell you about before it starts to happen?
It ain't easy.
What's that?
It ain't easy.
It ain't easy. It's no picnic, is it?
No.
Things start to break down. What you think you can do, you can't. I mean, last night we went out for strawberry picking. We have a little farm next
Yeah.
to it.
It's really nice.
And I couldn't even bend down to pick a strawberry. In my mind I could do it, but I just didn't have the strength.
No, I think all the things that we like to do, they're still important, but you can't do them. You just eliminate them.
It's like when your mind is ready to retire and you retire. As you get older, there's certain things that you resign yourself to. You say, well, that's what it is, and you just don't look back.
I always say to myself, there's always hope. You never give up. I just never give up. I always say there's another approach.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It
That's
is what
good.
it is. Don't scream and shout. It is what it is. Or as my mother used to say, what's the use of complaining? Good things happen, bad things happen. You've got to deal with them.
There was a book, Bad Things Happen to Good People. If you get through the bad times,
The good
see
times will
yourself.
come.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a while, but as I said before, I never give up hope. Always look to the future. Don't go back. Don't look back.
And don't watch TikTok.
And then you say, measure twice, cut once.
Measure twice, cut once,
Right.
which means prepare, be methodical, think it
Yeah.
through.
Yes.
Before you
Don't be impulsive. Measure
Right.
twice, cut once.
think before you jump.
Think before you jump. That's good advice. I'd never heard of measure twice, cut once. Is that like a
His
common?
his father was a carpenter.
My father was a carpenter, so that you had to measure twice before you cut.
Well, I always call Jack Mr. Safety because, be careful, and that's not the way to cut a bagel.
Measure twice, cut once. Even with bagels, measure
Even
twice,
with a
cut once.
bagel. Well, you have an expression.
What's the expression?
You used it yesterday.
Oh my God. I had a friend who had an expression that I also picked up. He said, life is a shit sandwich.
What are your thoughts when you look back about the idea of romance? It sounds like you guys have kept a spark in that way.
Are we sparking, Jack?
I think so, but like romantic times, different things,
Listen,
little moments that you've described.
I still get up every morning, and you can verify it with June. I sneak up behind her, I grab her by the head, I kiss her behind the ear, even to this day. She's my sweetheart.
He's a sweet guy.
He's a sweet guy, and you love it. You love it that he does that.
I do, of course.
Yes.
She takes care of me. Unbelievable. She really cares for me. So I know that.
I don't think there's any magic. You're upset, you get over it, and you move on to the next thing.
Well, she's still with me.
She's still doing your experiment. Whatever this experiment is, she's still signed up for it.
She's still there at my side, and that hasn't changed in over 50 years. I think I'm so lucky. Not many men can say that.
Yeah.
Almost 59 years in August.
What have you learned about love?
That it can last forever. That you can always be in love. The intensity is probably not the same as when you first met.
Love
Ups
is there.
and downs and waves, and
Yeah.
and you express it in different ways. as you
Yeah.
get older.
When you look back at your lives, what are you proud of?
Our children, our grandchildren.
Well, I'm proud of the role model that we played to our children, and staying together, treating our parents respectfully, being charitable, trying to repair the world.
How would you want to be remembered?
As a good person, as a caring person, trying to repair the world. Not easy.
You guys, this has been a real pleasure for me to talk to you. I really
Oh,
have loved
impressed
it.
with you.
Oh, thanks for
loved
taking
it.
all
So
this
much
time.
I loved
Oh.
it. I loved it. I loved it. I just think you're both extraordinary
Can we
and
adopt
wonderful.
you?
Yes, please. You know what? And I said this to Jeffrey, you know, my parents are no longer here and they haven't been for a while and years. And they passed before I had sort of discovered that I really like getting people to tell their stories. Like, so I never had these conversations with my own parents. And so it's meaningful to me to talk to somebody else's. Thank you for being so
Thank
open
you.
and going on this journey.
Okay.
I've
it
had a
was
really great time.
It was a great trip.
Yes, thank you. And I can't wait to see what Jeffrey does with it. You know,
Okay.
maybe he'll
really
make you
made us think.
he might make you a dinosaur like with AI and
You never know.
yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.